Well, I am proud to say that I was in the room where it happened. It being the historic vote to adopt the new Article 2 language of the UUA bylaws, the part that declares the values and covenants of our faith. Okay, I was in a virtual room with about 3,000 other Unitarian Universalists from across the US and Canada, but still, the vote was passed by a whopping 80% among the voting delegates, so it was a big, big deal. And when I think back on that day, it feels like I was there, like we were actually in a room together. But I realized that I don't hear a loud cheer, so we weren't all in the same room. But it was quite a big deal and a momentous occasion for Unitarian Universalists. Now, I've preached on the Article 2 language before, and you can bet that I'll preach on it again. But I certainly don't expect that you remember the details about the bylaws of this big organization that's headquartered across the country, even though NVUU is a member of that organization. So let me start by giving you a quick review. Article 2 explains the purposes and guiding spirit of Unitarian Universalism as accepted by the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, which is the full name of the UUA. Since the mid-'80s, Article 2 contained the 7 principles as we know them today, as well as the sources and purposes of Unitarian Universalism and statements of inclusion and freedom of belief. This is how Unitarian Universalism has known itself for the past 40 years. Article 2 is a statement of what holds us together in our diversity. It isn't a statement of our theology, but it creates a vessel, or as Maggie put it, that structure of a house that must be big enough to hold our assorted theological perspectives and be open for more. Now, you may think of theology as the study of God and the nature of divinity, and that particular religions have specific theologies. So you may wonder how the term applies to a religion that welcomes people with many perspectives about the divine, including the perspective that there's no such thing. For UUs, a more fitting definition of theology is this: theology is about what it means to be human in the cosmos and how we are related to all that is, including what we hold to be most sacred, or venerable, or meaningful. And that definition comes from the UUA website about Article 2. According to the bylaws, Article 2 is to be considered at least every 15 years, like reconsidered, to make sure that it still suits us. Because as a faith, we value constant learning and growing. We value the idea that revelation is not sealed, that there is more to be revealed to us about the nature of the way that we relate to each other in the cosmos. And perhaps we may be able to see a little more than some of our human shortcomings have let us see up to now. In 2020, when the UUA Board of Trustees created an Article 2 study commission, they charged the commission with considering what will enable our UUA to be a relevant and powerful force for spiritual and moral growth, healing, and justice. And they noted that in a recent study, UUs ranked love as a terminal value or highest value, more than any other religious or non-religious group. So the trustees wanted the Article 2 Study Commission to consider how to make it clear that love is at the center of our religion. that charge would definitely require a change to the existing language. Love isn't actually mentioned anywhere in the 7 principles, nor is it mentioned in the 8th principle on diversity and anti-oppression that this congregation adopted in 2023, though that principle does call for helping to build the beloved community. Well, for over 2 years, the study commission invited UUs to provide input and feedback. And then in early 2023, they proposed a draft version, which was considerably different than what we had known before. At General Assembly that year, the delegates voted to continue the conversation and to vote on whether to adopt the language at the 2024 GA, which happened last June, and that's exactly what happened. The Article 2 language is so different than the previous version. It does not include the principles that defined us for so many years. Those principles still exist, of course, but they are not part of the Article 2. The Commission heard that UUs wanted to move from "we aspire to live this way," kind of the sense from the principles, to "we mutually agree to do the things we aspire to the best of our ability." So there was more of a commitment, that there was more of a call for inclusion and for accountability. And those calls typically came from UUs who didn't always feel welcome in our congregations. Black, Indigenous, people of color, folks with disabilities, folks who are genderqueer, people who have never rejected their personal religious traditions and wanted to bring them into UU spaces because that is how they experience the divine. The Article 2 Commission proposed replacing the principles with 7 values that are at the heart of Unitarian Universalism. And where's my program? Hello, if you have your order of service, did we put it in here? We didn't, and I'm so sorry. I don't actually have a copy of it with us. What's that? No, I don't, thank you. But it's kind of a, it's up on the bulletin board. It's around, so I just don't have a copy right here. But it's a diagram that has love in the center. And around it are these 6 principles: justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. Okay, the diagram is coming forward. And you can kind of see it, yeah, it's a little, yeah, walk around, take a look. As an aside, I remember those 6 values by the acronym or the mnemonic JETPIG. JETPIG. Justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, generosity. Okay. Yeah. For each of the 6 surrounding values, there is a definition in the text, a defining action statement, and a covenant. A covenant. So, but the graphic is what you're going to remember, right? On your way out today, I hope you'll pick up a copy of the new Article 2 values and covenant statement. There's some over there, and I probably will have to make more, which is a good thing. When you have a chance this week, I invite you to spend some time with it. And as you read the values and covenants, you will notice that the principles are woven into them. But the emphasis is different. So instead of the second principles, we affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. The new value of justice says, we covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. And the value of equity states, we covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. The fourth principle, the one that Maggie mentioned, we affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, is present in the newly added value of pluralism. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. These values and covenants are still aspirational because no one expects that we will do them perfectly. But we explicitly agree to try. As the article says, we are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. So this week, as you consider how these values and covenants apply to you, think also about how they apply to us all in community. I invite you to consider whether these values and covenants are welcoming to people with traditionally marginalized identities that also share our values. How might these values and covenants change our practice of Unitarian Universalism right here at NVUU? At the next week's service, you'll get a chance to share your perspectives, and I hope you'll come back for that conversation. I leave you with a final thought. One of the stated purposes of the UUA is now healing historic injustices. This week, I learned about Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. Anybody ever heard of her? She was born to free black parents in Maryland in 1820, in the 1820s. And in her day, she was widely known as a writer and advocate for abolition and later for women's rights. Although she never left her American Methodist Episcopal Church, she became a member of the first Unitarian Church of Philadelphia while in her 40s. At a conference in 1875, she spoke about wanting what was wanting in American civilization. She said it was a keener and deeper, broader and tenderer sense of justice, a sense of humanity which shall crystallize into the life of the nation the sentiment that justice, simple justice, is the right, not simply of the strong and powerful, but of all God's children. She called for a broader humanity in which we see all people as, quote, the children of the living God, of that God whom we may earnestly hope is in perfect wisdom and in perfect love, working for the best good of all, unquote. Why do we need a revised Article 2? Because in 150 years, we may have moved closer to justice in some respects, but it is still not enough. It is not nearly enough. We need a modified vessel, a modified house, fitted for the future, powered by more deliberate, unifying approaches to the struggle ahead. I pray that the UUA's revised values and covenant will propel all of us UUs in our work for simple justice, bringing the highest possible wisdom we have and our love to the work for the best good of all. May it be so. Amen.